Welcome. This is the Communist University. I'm Jim Moody. I've been associated with CPGB since the Leninist times. Today we have Wrack, who's one of the organisers of talking about socialism. And the title of what he's talking about is Envisioning the Socialist Future. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Comrade Chair. Comrades, so first of all, the title, Jim's just changed it, but he's made a good point. Right, so Jim said, envisaging the socialist future. The title I was given was envisaging communism, or the communist future. From my point of view, as a Marxist, following Marx, following Engels, my position is that they viewed both terms as meaning the same thing. Socialism and communism meant to them the same thing. That is, the society that supersedes capitalism. Now, there's a difference there between me and others in talking about socialism, not all of them in talking about socialism. And comrades here, I know, because I don't know whether it's collectively, but in the discussions, of course, I've been aware of this for a long time. There is a tradition that regards socialism as meaning something other than communism. It means to those from that tradition, following Lenin, and if you like, official communism, it means a stage towards communism. I don't review it like that, and if I've got time, or as a result of the discussion, I'll come back to this question about the phases of communism and how they develop and what we may or may not call them. The words that we use don't necessarily matter so long as we understand what we mean by them, but it does cause confusion. Secondly, with regards to Comrade Jim's introduction, the full title of our organisation is talking about socialism from a Marxist point of view. Now, that is important for us because socialism and communism both have their baggage. They both come with histories, neither of which, in terms of the 20th century and since, are particularly attractive. And those of us who are Marxists, who advocate the complete abolition of capitalism, whether we call that communism or socialism, have to deal with the baggage that comes with it. Now, this talk and this university is taking place against what I consider to be one of the most significant developments on the left in British politics for a considerable time. And that is the formation, or the process of formation, of this new party launched by Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana, both former Labour MPs, for a new left-wing party. Now, amongst the people here, there may be all sorts of scepticism, doubt about what that party is going to be, what it's going to achieve, how it's going to succeed, and so on. From my point of view, it's clear that the politics that will be pushed from the top and probably accepted by the majority will be the programme and policies of Jeremy Corbyn's manifestos in 2017 and 2019, which in my opinion are not socialist, and therefore, from my point of view, not communist. They are mild versions of what you might call social democracy, even if you can call it that. They're not, and they weren't as radical as the program of the alternative economic strategy of Tony Benn and others in the Tribune group in the Labour Party, which was mirrored internationally by the likes of Mitterrand in France or Papandreou in Greece in the early 1980s. Their more radical policies in those two countries that I just mentioned were, when they got into power, completely abandoned. They capitulated to the pressure of international capital. And that we have to point out in terms of, if, I don't know whether there's agreement on this, I think that there is, if we are to work in this new left party, let's call it that for the time being. Zara Sultana says she wants it to be called the left party. But this new left party, if we're going to work inside that and argue for policies and a program that will meet the needs of today, we will have to use examples from the past and examples, contemporary examples, to show how it is impossible to achieve what the people joining this party want unless they are prepared to adopt and champion communist ideas, socialist ideas. And I'm going to use those words interchangeably, as I did a moment ago in my slip-on. But for me, they mean the same thing. The ideas of communism need to become the common sense of the working class here and internationally. So, envisaging communism. What is it that we're trying to persuade people who are coming into political activity? What is it we're trying to show what is possible? And not only what is possible, but what is necessary. What sort of society is it? Now, Marx famously, I'm sure many of you will know, I think it was in the afterword to the second German edition of the first volume of Capital, he says that, we're not in the business of making cookbooks for the future society. My position is actually 160 years later, we're in a much better position to actually begin to give a lot more detail about what society might be like under a communist society. But I'll just talk in broad terms for the moment. A society in which capitalism has been abolished. So that's the first and fundamental point as far as I'm concerned. Capitalism is based on the private ownership, capitalist ownership of the means of production. It's a tiny class. More research, more work, more analysis needs to be given to this question. I don't have the time in the time that I've been allotted to go into some of it, but I did some very quick AI investigations about who owns what and what proportion of world trade, the world economy in different sectors. And you look at it, and it's a tiny proportion of the world's population own everything from mining to distribution to science to technology. So the capitalist class, which owns the means of production, by that, I'm sure we can all agree, we're talking about the land, the waters, the minerals within the land, the vegetation upon the land. We're talking about the machines, the factories, the science, the technology. All of that is owned. We can quibble about all, but all of that, it's important, all of that is owned by the capitalist class. And through their ownership of that, they have control over the life and death of every other person on the planet. 8.2 billion, more than half of that you could, well, the International Labour Organization puts the world labour force at something like 3.4 billion. If you take into account their families, their dependents, and so on, it is the overwhelming majority of the human population on the earth. And those people either work or do not work at the whim of the capitalist class. Everything that we see on the planet which motivates people to get involved in left-wing politics is a reflection or a response to that basic question of the property question, which was addressed by Marx with Engels in the Communist Manifesto, made it the cornerstone of that document. And it remained the cornerstone, the property question. Who owns? Who controls? Who decides how the product is distributed? I don't have time to go into the question of historical materialism and how all of this developed, but from the Netherlands and Britain almost 400 years ago, we get the development of capitalism, which has generalized across the whole planet, extending into every single nook and cranny in the search for what? In the search for surplus value. Surplus value is essentially, putting it simply, the new value that is extracted from the worker who is put to work with the machinery, with whatever. And that surplus value goes to the capitalist owners, and it's used to cover rent, interest, profit, out of which there's the reinvestment and there's the luxuries that we see flaunted in our face on a daily basis. So I'm going to reduce this, and I think it's important how we get our ideas across. Capitalism is a system based on profit. And we should explain why we are against the profit system. Because everything that happens and everything that doesn't depends upon whether the capitalist class, that minority class, is prepared to invest its profit back into the economy and whether people are put to work or not. Now, we are told repeatedly that capitalism is the most efficient way of organizing society. It's the most efficient way of organizing production. And it guarantees that everybody gets what they need. Well, of course, anybody with eyes, anybody that can read, anybody that watches the news knows that that is not the case. We see, and I don't have, again, time to go into the figures, we see how a small number, and it's literally a small number of people, are billionaires. Collectively, I think the top 10 trillionaires, worth more than big countries put together. While at the same time, even in advanced capitalist countries like the UK or America, we walk out of the streets here in London, we can see poverty amidst the plenty. We can see homelessness. We can see food banks. And of course, we see climate catastrophe looming, and we see war. These are all the consequences of the profit system. And so in our engagement with others, because we're never going to change society with a few people in this room, we need to have millions upon millions upon millions who see themselves as communists. Now, what would that communist society be, I asked? Well, it would be the complete antithesis of the society that we have now. It would no longer have the private capitalist ownership of the land, of the waters. Just look at what's happening with the water in the UK at the moment. It would not have the private capitalist ownership of the factories, of the science, the technology. Something like 5 companies controlling 80 or more percent of mobile phones, of use of the cloud, and so on. Tiny proportions. A small number of firms control something like 70% of the media that circulates around the globe. Everything in this society is geared towards extending and protecting the interests of this tiny class. How can that happen? Because we, as a working class, are not conscious of what is necessary, of how it can be changed, and of the power that our class has. Why not? Because the people that have led our class have misled it again and again and again by seeking not to abolish capitalism, but to manage it. And it's a simple phrase, but it's one that I particularly like. We've got to fight inside this new organization. And we've got to say that the aim of this party has to be clear what it's against. It is against the profit system. It cannot aim to manage capitalism. It must aim to abolish it. And so there we begin. I think that we will get support, interest, certainly, and we can go on to explain that by overcoming capitalism, by superseding the profit system, by getting rid of the private ownership of the means of production, the working class taking power, and ultimately through the disappearance of classes, society as a whole takes control of what is produced. When the worker produces something, the product is separated from her or him. There's a process of alienation taking place. We have no real interest in what happens. We go to work, we work at a machine. Some might have a better job and it's a bit more interesting. But what we produce is wrested from us immediately. It's the property of another class. Under communism, we have an association of producers. Because we remove the private ownership of the means of production and the competition for profit, we have a change in the way that everybody views society and the way that society is organized. When we are involved in this new party, when we're talking to people, what is it that will have been motivating them? Well, there are various crises that everybody who is conscious, who's paying attention, is aware of. One is the question of what's happening in Israel, Gaza. That has caused absolutely worldwide outrage, anger, and probably frustration. Why aren't people doing anything about it? Why can't we do something about it? It's not enough to be angry. It's not enough to be upset. We have to have a program. So what force in society can begin to affect change? We've got wars. We can look further than Israel. We can look not so far away from Israel. We can look at what's going on in the Sudan, at the hunger, the starvation, the mass migration that's taking place because of wars there. We can see what's happening in Ukraine. What is it that causes wars ultimately? It is the competition between rival capitalists and capitalist states for profit, for ownership and control of minerals, of strategic places, of distribution networks, for the domination on a world scale of America and the rising opposite of China. And we can all see the danger looming of a world war, possibly with nuclear weapons, and the obliteration and annihilation of humanity. That is down to the profit system. If people, young people particularly, want to end war, we have to teach them that to end war, you have to end the profit system. Communism would be a society in which there is no such economic competition. It removes the possibility of war. Communism replaces competition with collaboration or cooperation, because the private ownership by that minority class has been superseded by the ownership of the means of production by everyone. War, therefore, is a product of class society, and particularly we're talking about capitalist society. A huge number of people, in fact, everybody is aware of it, perhaps some people disregard it, but the climate catastrophe that we're facing, global warming, the consequence that we see with extreme weather events and so on, the mass destruction that that causes, the threat that it's going to pose to people who live on shorelines, for example, in Bangladesh and other countries. What is that a consequence of? It's a consequence of the profit system. It's a consequence of capitalism, because the capitalist class is only interested in making a profit, and they do not care how that profit is made. If they make emissions that warm the environment, profit comes first. And that applies to everything, whether it's the destruction of the rainforest or whatever. The interests of the private capitalists in that tiny class is destroying the planet. And we face real catastrophe in the not too distant future unless the system is overthrown, unless the system is ended and we get a collaborative, cooperative, communist society which puts the needs of everybody, that includes nature, of which we are a part and on which we depend, forefront. And obviously, the question of inequality, poverty, degradation, squalor. 4.4 billion people on this planet do not have ready access to clean water. In the third decade of the 21st century. That is, to anybody's mind, shocking and unacceptable. So what is necessary? What is inadequate is the idea that we can talk in vague, woolly terms about peace and justice and fairness and a better society without explaining what prevents those words from having any real material content. We have to identify our opponent, and our opponent is capitalism. Our opponent is the capitalist class. And of course, with the capitalist class comes its state. And its state is the army, the police, the law courts, the prisons, the legislation, the protection of private ownership, and the capitalist class depending on the support that we get for communist movements, will not hesitate to use all its force to stop the working class from coming to power. So we have to address that question. We have to destroy, smash, wreck, uproot the capitalist state. So inequality, degradation, social inequality, that clearly is a product of capitalism. When somebody goes to work and they make the profit for the boss, for the owner, that is the unpaid wages of the worker who's produced the product. That's the unpaid wages that's going into, that's making that profit. If you don't work, then depending on the level of reforms that have been obtained, or in countries where there's no reforms, you either have to survive on the meager benefits, or you don't survive at all. You have to eke out a living or you die. And because of the nature of the capitalist system, the reproduction of profit, what we're seeing, and we've seen intensely over the last decade, is the widening of this gap between the rich and the poor. That is down to capitalism. So on any one of these three particular crises, if you want to look at them, what is the cause? What is the answer? The cause is capitalism. The cause is the capitalist system. It's the profit system. The answer is the abolition of that system. How is that to be done? There's only one force in society that can change this state of affairs, and that is the international working class. It can't be done by an individual or a group of individuals, however well-meaning. It can't be done by clicking a like on Facebook or becoming part of a WhatsApp group. It takes organization. It takes planning. It takes the building of parties that have as their aim the overthrow of capitalism and the inauguration of a new society. So it means building mass communist or mass socialist, where they mean the same thing, parties. Well, what is the aim of those parties? The aim of those parties is, as part of the working class, for the working class to come to power and introduce what might be called extreme democracy, destroying the elements of the old capitalist state and replacing it with proper democracy. So we have at the moment elections once every 4 or 5 years. MPs go into parliament, they're bribed, they're corrupted, they lose sight, even if they had good ideas in the first place. Most of them never did. But parliament has no real power. It does have power, we shouldn't ignore it. But the decisions that affect most of our lives take place in the boardrooms of the companies. They decide whether a plant is built in Sunderland or in South Africa. That's just the alliteration. So we need to argue for real democracy. Obviously, in this room, there won't be any opposition. There may be in this new party, I doubt it. But we would need to fight for it. Abolition of the monarchy, abolition of the House of Lords, annual elections, the right of recall for all elected representatives only taking the average wage of the people that they're representing. The idea that what we do is we use the bodies that currently exist to get people into position to fight for the abolition of capitalism and the inauguration of a new society. Now, One of the differences, and I don't wish to exaggerate this, but one of the differences that has developed in the course of the discussions over forging communist unity is, what is the task of the working class when it comes to power? In my opinion, that task is not simply to extend democracy and break with the capitalist state. It is not enough to break with the capitalist state and inaugurate, for example, whatever you call it, a democratic republic or period of workers' rule, unless that working class rule, that democratic republic, is also going to take steps immediately to begin the expropriation of the capitalist class. And the two go hand in hand. And so that there has been a difference over this. I don't have time to develop it. I am aware that I'm speaking against the background of the breakdown of these discussions. People will put the onus on TAS because we pulled the plug, we walked away. I'll say this now, it was frustrating and disappointing to us, as I'm sure it was to people who were watching. We are committed to communist unity. We cannot build mass communist parties without organising together. It's clearly not an easy process. I'm prepared and happy to answer any questions about anything that's happened in terms of the differences or any of the processes in this discussion, and we'll welcome those questions. But what's our role? It's to bring or to help the working class come into power and inaugurating a new society. Through a period, and again, this question of the transition has been, there is a difference there. But if you read the material that I have written or that TAS has written, you will, I think, doubt the way that it's been reported. There clearly is a period in which the working class in power has to preside over the abolition of private property, and in which the working class uses its power to abolish private property entirely, and through that process, abolishing itself as a class. Because everybody will work in the new society. There will be no boss. There will be no owner other than collectively in society. And so that period in which the power of the capitalist state is smashed, is destroyed, and it's replaced by the organized working class. And ultimately those classes disappear. And the governance of people, to paraphrase Engels, is replaced by the administration of things. So what is communism? I haven't been able to touch on a huge amount that I wanted to. And you'll see that I've not referred to a single note that I had because of the time that I've got. But the new society, no classes, no state, no arbitrary power, collective ownership, collective democratic decisions. For the first time since hunter-gatherer society, people will have control over what they produce, how it is distributed, how it is organized. It's a society in which, because of the level of development that we have seen under capitalism. So capitalism has developed the means of production, but in a very, very lopsided way, hasn't it? We've seen tremendous development of science, of technology, of machinery. But each new development means that workers are thrown out of work to live in destitution or on inadequate benefits. A communist society would see an acceleration, in my opinion, of the development of science and technology, but it would be collectively owned, and it would be used, instead of denying people work, it would involve everybody, and the working week would be immeasurably diminished. So we've had historically the campaign for the 10-hour day, for the 8-hour day, for the 35-hour week, and so on. I'm not going to suck a figure out, but under communism, where capitalism is rotten right, we could feed the world now with a different form of organization. We could create homes everywhere, replacing the shanty towns or places where there are no homes. But in order to do that, we have to break with capitalism. We need a fundamental break with the capitalist system. And communism will ensure that everybody is involved, should they wish, and I think everybody will wish it, to be involved in the decision making about how society is organized, something that they are completely deprived of at the moment. And because of the shorter working week and the role of technology allowing that, people will have the time to participate in the running of society. They also have the time to do whatever else they want, whether that's learn a musical instrument or learn a foreign language or whatever. You'll be able to mark the advancement or development of society by the leisure time that people have. The leisured class at the moment is the capitalist class who can sail their yachts around the world and never have to do a day's job apart from clipping their coupons. But the whole of society will have more leisure time to do with what they want, because they are in control of what is produced and how it's distributed. So I haven't gone into any detail about the question of the transition period. I just want to say the idea that we think things are going to happen overnight is ludicrous. It's incompatible with anything that we've written. The question of the middle class, which has been another difference between us, it is, in my opinion, something that is misrepresented. We've answered. So read the material that Taz has put out, whether it's Ed or me or others in talking about socialism on these issues. The last article that I wrote on the subject, which was called Forging Communist Unity, A Change is Needed, goes in some detail, but not a lot, some of these questions, of the question of the programme. Do we agree with the need of a programme? Of course we do. Reforms and reformism. Are we against reforms? Of course we're not. Do we underestimate the role of the petty producer? No, I don't think we do. But there needs to be more analysis on it. Who is being talked about when we talk about the middle class? What's the relationship to the means of production when we're talking about that? What obstacle will that strata in society play? But more importantly, because of course we recognise that there is a strata that is not part of the working class, but is not fully absorbed into the capitalist class. Of course that is there. The question is, what's the level of consciousness of that class? Which way are they looking? I believe that through the development of communist ideas, finding an echo in society, large sections, if not all, of that middle strata can be won to the ideas of a new, different form of society. Now, maybe, it's pie in the sky. Maybe I'm completely ridiculous. But at the moment, communist ideas have been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. So the danger is that we look at things just as they are at the moment, rather than as they develop. Last point, and I've missed out so much. Last point is, what is it that we need? So a mass party. a mass party of communism, our intervention, in my opinion, to this new left party is an important, vital role or step towards developing that new party. If we do not take our ideas to the working class and to the advanced sections, those that are prepared to get involved in political ideas, and engage them and challenge them and have them challenge us and then give our answers to them, then we're not being responsible as communists. We are a very, very small minority. And if we want to grow into the force that we have to become, we have to take our ideas where they may get an echo, and I think this new party they will. But that doesn't mean abandoning our program or watering it down. It means having arguments. It means challenging. It means pointing out that a mixed economy or partial nationalization with the same old running of these organizations in the interest of capitalism is not adequate. It's not what we're aiming for. Communism means democratic common ownership of the resources of society. Once we start engaging around simple questions of communism, I think we will find great support because they begin to give answers for those that are looking for them. We've got a lot of work to do. Forging communist unity has fallen apart. Comrades here can put the blame where you want. I can answer, given time, whatever points of questions that you have. In order to build unity, you need to have confidence and trust in the party or parties that you're working with. And frankly, we lost that. But the idea that somehow the people in TAS are not serious or that they're frightened of being in a minority and other psychological explanations are not justified. In the New Left Party, those of us, and it's not just people in the CPGB or TAS, small organisations as we are, but it may well be that the RCP are in there. It may well be that the Socialist Party are in there. It may well be that the SWP are somewhere around there. Socialist Alternative. There are all these organisations that stand for the abolition of capitalism and the inauguration of a new society. We need to find a way of organising a collective communist intervention in this new party. Now, I know what the answer will be to begin with. It will be rebuffed and so on, and everybody will be saying, well, there's only one place for the national executive for somebody on the left, and so it's going to be one of our people, so on. And we're going to have to try and find a way to overcome all of that. And so I've got no doubt that we'll be working with comrades from the CPGB in this new party. With that, I'm going to finish, aware that I've not covered a lot of things that I wanted to say, and aware that I've not dealt with a lot of my responses to the things that have been raised, even about our own participation in this organisation, in this communist university. So I'm going to stop there and